We hope you're as excited as we are about the afternoon sessions. And to kick things off is Rob Hinchcliffe from Rushmore.fm. And he's going to be talking about the changing nature of content. Joining him is Milica. Welcome to them both.
Hello. So we've got a couple of empty chairs, so I'm going to ask you guys to try to fill in for the others who are still having lunch. Because there is a pattern here. We get really, not saying that other speakers weren't cool, but we get ultra cool speakers for after lunch to get the juices moving. So now we have somebody who has worked as the news editor of Yahoo at the point in time when their news site was biggest only second to BBC in the UK. If you have been to London, you have definitely read some stuff from the blog that he has founded, now called The Londonist. But what he's really obsessed about is the online communities and content. He's so obsessed about online communities and context that some of the online content that he had played around with got him banned from life from entering one part of the UK government. We will talk about that a bit later. He has worked some with J.K. Rowling on Harry Potter. He has done some work. Thank you very much. We've got some. Anybody else Harry Potter fan?
She's not here, I'm afraid. It's just me.
You're going to have to redo your presentation. So without any further ado, Rob Hinchcliffe, please take it away.
Hello, everybody. So like Millie said, I'm kind of obsessed with content and the way that content changes when communities hit it and people hit it, and what difference that makes, and how people make content better and when they interact with it, and the way that I guess content also makes our relationships with each other better when we come into contact with it. So yes, a little bit about me. Like Millie said, I used to work for Yahoo. I was the news editor for 2 years. I started a blog called Londonist, which is a kind of collaborative blog, a very community-driven thing. I went to work for a startup called Quip, which is now owned by Yelp, which is a user-generated reviews and recommendation site. And then I worked for a media agency where, yes, I worked on Pottermore, the Harry Potter kind of digital reading experience from J.K. Rowling, but I also worked with Warner Brothers and the BBC and Channel 4 and Nando's, the chicken people, and ASOS, the clothes people, so a wide variety of clients. What I want to do is just talk a little bit about how we got to this point where we are with the web, because just set a little bit of context, a quick history lesson. We have evolved, that says, on your lovely screen up here. Which film is that from? Bonus points? Nope, not Planet of the Apes. 2001. So like the apes from 2001, we kind of got a bit excited and evolved in terms of the web. It did start out as kind of a big kind of switchboard communication device where you could one-to-one talk or one-to-many talk, and it was full of bulletin boards and message boards and things like that. And then it kind of quickly evolved into this kind of, I guess the corporates got hold of it, and it became somewhere where you could buy stuff or read stuff, and it was kind of a carbon copy of our kind of commercial infrastructures where you could download a PDF instead of buying the magazine. Simple days. Or you could go into a virtual store and buy a virtual item. And that kind of, it was familiar to us, that environment. We knew, it was like a copy of what we did in real life, which was great, and it kind of brought the web into the mainstream. And then came Web 2.0. How long is it since someone stood up on a stage at a tech conference and said Web 2.0? It sounds kind of Victorian, doesn't it? It's like saying steam power or something. But Web 2.0, it's weird because we're still living with Web 2.0 stuff. We were asked to create profiles and friend people and like stuff and recommend stuff and get recommendations based on our profiles and things like that. And now we're kind of growing out of that stage of the web. And the question we're asking, just like the people in 2001, is what's next? So there's the little Lego spaceman with the little monolith from 2000. If you've not seen 2001, this doesn't really make sense. You can ignore the bottom half of the screen. But what I want to talk about today is kind of what these new behaviors are that are kind of taking us away from this kind of Web 2.0 world, which feels a bit old-fashioned now. Because I don't want to just say things are changing for the sake of it. I want you to believe me. So I'm going to just look at a few of those behaviors I think we're seeing. And then look at the kind of challenges that they create for us, and not challenges in a scary, shit, run for the hills kind of way, but challenges in a kind of, interesting, what can we do with that kind of way? And then how we make the best of them, and I'll give a few examples. So the first kind of behavior that we're seeing, I think, these kind of new paradigms of the web is expectancy. People expect things to be mobile. They expect it to be available on different devices because we've got 3G and maybe 4G if you're lucky. They expect it to be social. They expect it to be participatory. They expect it to be on different for depending on what environment they're in. They don't expect to see the same content twice if they're looking at it in a different place on a different device. And the open web, what used to be called the semantic web, I guess, before people got annoyed with that term, the open web of data, this kind of cloud of metadata that we create around content every time we interact with it. Tagging it and geolocation, things like that, all that kind of stuff that accumulates around the core content, and there's more and more of that being created now, and we want to do stuff with it. And omnipotent social, which is exactly what it sounds like. It's that Facebook and Twitter are not kind of discrete environments anymore. They are woven through everything else that we do and see. That idea of a social web is not a different thing. It's when you go to a conference or a conference is all about social media now, it feels slightly weird and outdated because it's just media. It's the thing. Social is in everything that we consume. So we've all got this kind of set of expectations around the content that we're consuming. Creativity. I think there's a few things which were causing a lot more creativity and innovation in some of these industries now. So the idea of digital natives, which is what that thing says, that collection of small lights there says. Digital natives are basically the people who grew up with the web, people who are younger than me, the bastards, making me feel old. But the people who don't know nothing else but the web, and the social web as well, are now going to work. They're growing up and leaving school and putting on their big boy shoes and going to do stuff in the real world. And they're introducing the web into environments where it wasn't really introduced to before. And they're getting less dissent for it. You know, we're seeing less arguments and less fear and less kind of, what's this internet thing you speak of? So we're seeing less and less of that now. So the internet and the web is kind of weaving its way into places where it's never been before. And that's happened over the past 4 or 5 years, I think. And fickle fans, this idea of that, to get your attention now, I have to work really hard. I mean, there's like 30% of you right now on Twitter. I'm having to work hard. So TV companies, publishers, movie industry, music industry, everyone's having to work incredibly hard to get your attention because we're just all the time because there's so much stuff to consume. And that's creating innovation because people are having to come up with new ideas. They can't just stick the name of their film on a billboard every morning and put it on a bus. You know, that just doesn't work anymore. So they're having to come up with new and exciting ways to get our attention. Technology. Couldn't really stand up here and not have technology on this slide, but convergence is a buzzword which gets used an awful lot at conferences like this, and someone said it yesterday, you know, everything is converging, and they've been saying it for about 5 years, everything is converging. It's one of those like old buzzwords, the meaning gets rubbed off the more and more we use it, but I think we're actually seeing now, finally, it's like people standing up and going, this year is the year of the mobile. It's actually finally happening, convergence. So I think we're seeing a lot of industries just kind of melding with each other. And the reason for that is because a lot of industries are having to fight for survival. I think it shouldn't be called convergence anymore. It should just be called fighting or evolving or adapting. I mean, you're having to embrace the web and technology now, otherwise you're going to die as an industry. And amateurization, and the barrier to entry in terms of technology is just almost so low it's non-existent, and the cost of technology is so low these days that anybody can do it. What used to be called bedroom producers are now just iPad in a coffee shop producers or phone in the street producers. They can just do anything with what fits in their pocket, and which they get free on a O2 when they get their phone. So we're seeing this kind of sub-industry under the core media industry now, which is of people adapting stuff and recycling stuff and reappropriating stuff. They don't have to ask for permission for it. They're just doing it, and sometimes it's more interesting than the official stuff. And money. Money doesn't get talked about at conferences a lot because it's evil and boring, generally. Hang on a second. It's so evil, I had to have a drink. And spreadsheets and job titles aren't very interesting inherently, but it's worth talking about briefly because when I worked, I'll give you an example. When I worked at Think, which is the agency I worked at, we worked at Channel 4 on a TV program called Utopia. If any of you from the UK, you might have seen it earlier this year. It was like a 6-part drama by Dennis Kelly. We worked on the digital kind of experience around that TV show. And the first person we worked with at Channel 4 was called the Multi-Platform Commissioning Editor for Drama, which is not a job title you would have seen 5 years ago, but those and my old job title at Think was Community Strategist, which is A, wanky, and B, doesn't really mean very much. And when I try and explain it to my mum, she doesn't know idea what I do. But those job titles didn't exist 5 years ago. The reason they exist now is because they have an effect on the bottom line. They have an ROI. And big corporations like Channel 4 know that, and that's why they've got job titles with people who do stuff called multi-platform commissioning editor, which they can't fit on the job card. And spreadsheets now, you look at marketing budgets for things like films and music and newspapers and things like that, they've got a line in there which says digital marketing or social media or social marketing or something like that. That they have to be born in there. So money's it's getting introduced to all these things. And the last one is permission, which I've touched on a little bit already. And it's the big one for me because it's this idea that people don't have to ask to play with toys that don't belong to them anymore. 5, 6 years ago, if you wanted to go and just reappropriate something, a TV program, or make your own, fan fiction or something like that, you would probably get sued. And now it's accepted behavior that you won't. And that's incredibly scary, and that's why that word is in the kind of introduction to this presentation. The thing for anyone who's producing content, to go to them and say, the means of production have changed, you are not 100% in control of what you're producing anymore. For anyone, whether it's government policy right through down to cartoons in the local newspaper, you don't control that anymore. Someone can take it and do stuff with it, and you really haven't got much to do about that. And so you're not just delivering content to me on multiple layers in different channels on different devices. I can add layers to it myself, and that's quite a scary thought. And you can kind of cut the industry in half, and the people who you tell them that, and they see it as kind of a scary consequence of what's happening with the web, or there's the people who see it as an interesting byproduct of what's happening with the web. And it's the people who are seeing it as an interesting byproduct who are actually doing interesting, fun, and profitable stuff with it, I think. Does anybody know what comic that's from? You probably can't even see the picture, I don't know why I'm asking. Does anybody know what comic this is from? It's quite a famous graphic novel. Oh, come on, is this not an audience full of nerds, or have I come to the wrong room? It's The Watchmen, it's by Alan Moore. So these are the challenges and the next few slides all use pictures from The Watchmen by Alan Moore for no particular reason other than I just have to make putting these decks together interesting for myself as well. Our experiences are becoming atomized. They are becoming disparate. We are used to this now. Consuming media is the first challenge we have as people who are producing this stuff and marketing this stuff and creating websites around this stuff, is that nothing is finite. Nothing has a kind of hard line around it anymore. The idea of a TV program being delivered to you at a specific time on a specific day of the week that's going to last a specific length, and then you can't watch the next one until the next week at the same time, just sounds stupid. And that didn't sound stupid 3 or 4 years ago, but the fact that sounds stupid now just shows how kind of disparate those experiences are. And we expect a second screen experience around things. We expect a third and fourth screen experience sometimes. And that's quite scary for producers. And we can all time travel now. In a sense. Again, when we went to work with Channel 4 in the TV industry, the first thing they told us was that 50% of the people who watch their dramas on Channel 4 watch them time shifted. And time shifted is just a wanky marketing speak for later on. So 50% of the people who watch their drama programs don't watch them when they're on the television. They'll watch them either buy on DVD, or they'll watch it on 4OD, or they'll watch it, they'll download it later on, or they'll watch it on demand, or TiVo it, or Sky Plus it, or whatever. Half the people are watching the TV program. So you don't know when people are watching a TV program anymore. Just like you don't know when they're listening to your album or reading your book or anything like that. So marketing to them, or talking to them, or engaging with them is very, 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 very difficult. But it's also a fun and interesting way of doing it. It's a super criminal. You can tell he's a criminal because he has multiple television sets. They all do, for some reason. As I said before, our attention is fragmented. We are creating content around content around content around content. So there's a TV program, or there's a film, or there's a book, or there's a newspaper that's got a hashtag, that's got an article in it, that's also got a Tumblr page, which has also got an Instapaper, which is also on Twitter, which also has a Facebook following, and probably has some fan fiction about two people having sex over here. So that's content within content, and that kind of Russian doll of content means content is kind of eating itself. A good example of this, and a really crude example of this, is True Blood, the excellently well-written, sexy vampire TV drama. One of the TV channels that were showing it in the States decided they were going to put the best tweets about True Blood on the screen while True Blood was on. And the panel which the tweets were in took up a third of the screen. So very, very quickly, all the tweets became, get rid of the tweets because I can't see the sexy vampires. And that balance, I mean, it's a very crude example, but it shows that balance of trying to show the meta content and all the different content around something is very, very difficult to do, and people get pissed off with it very quickly. And attention needs to finding the right level of attention for something is very difficult because not everything has its own, attention level. So when we read the scripts for this TV drama we were working on, we realized it was a very complicated, quite intelligent, violent conspiracy thriller that you really had to pay attention to that was on for an hour. So we couldn't do a second screen experience where you're doing this, like that, because you would miss half the TV show, and then when you watched it next week, you wouldn't have a clue what was going on. And just knowing that is something that a lot of people don't take into account, I don't think, when they're creating experiences for media or for any kind of content. That you've got to find the attention level. So we had to create something around a TV program that people could experience when it wasn't on, which is an entirely different thing to do. And it's decisions like that we're having to start to make now. And this idea of convergence is throwing up the idea that we all have to work together, which is really difficult because we all work at different speeds. I mean, if you're working music producers and TV producers and film producers and web producers, we're all having to, all these industries are converging, like we said, but they all do different things in different ways. Again, when we were working for TV, they asked us what the website was going to look like, and we said, well, we'll just give us the credit sequence for the TV program, and we will base the look and feel of the website on that. And they just pissed themselves for about 5 minutes because they don't produce the credit sequence for the TV show until about 2 weeks before it goes on air. And we were like, oh, we didn't know that. And it's that these different levels, the way we're working on different watches, it's very difficult to do. We had to get a Post-it note in shot in the first episode of the TV show we worked on because it had a URL written on it. And we wanted it in the back of the shot just for the nerds to pick up on and then go to the website. And to get that Post-it note in shot, we had to talk to, obviously, the writer to get his permission, the director, the assistant director, the producer, the set dresser, the script editor, the cameraman, the editor, and about 2 other people. There's about 10 people we had to speak to put a Post-it note in a flipping TV show. And scripts in TV shows change they can change up to 2 minutes before the scene gets shot. So if you're incredibly expensive, multi-platform, 360 transmedia experience over here on the web relies on one actor saying one line that he decides not to say on the day, you're screwed. And it's those kind of, the different stages that we work at, the different paces that we work at that are kind of causing an awful lot of problems. But once we get them smoothed out, we'll kind of hopefully create some interesting experiences. A couple of examples before I finish up talking here. Does anybody know who that is? Hey, who's that? It's Tim Schafer. Yeah, so what does Tim Schafer do? He makes video games, and he made he's making right now a video game which was called Double Fine Adventure, which was one of the first Kickstarter projects to beat $1 million last year. The reason I'm showing you this is because when you pledged for the Double Fine Adventure, what you were pledging for was not to buy the game. You were giving them money to be part of the experience of making the game. And he actually says, Tim Schafer, it's worth going, the Kickstarter page is still there, it's worth going to watch his pitch. Because what he says is it's going to be an adventure, both the process and the product. And I think that sentence pretty much sums up how kind of we're doing the social web and social marketing and presenting content to people now for when we will be for the next 5 years. People don't care about just buying the product anymore. They want to be part of the process of creating that product. And that's why Tim Schafer raised $1 million in a little under a week for his video game with little aliens in it. And that's quite an interesting kind of paradigm shift in terms of how people want to experience what you're giving them as content. And this is the CEO of Netflix saying, I will eat your babies to the traditional TV industry. It's not, of course, it's Kevin Spacey from House of Cards. But Netflix is another incredible example because the guy who was in charge of Netflix famously said, oh, we want to become HBO before HBO becomes us. So they went and looked at all the data of all the people who'd ever kind of bought anything from them and said, okay, well, people want to see a political drama starring Kevin Spacey, let's make one, let's spend $100 million shooting all 13 episodes, screw creating a pilot and seeing what people think of it. Let's just create, and people download all 13 episodes at the same time. And just basically broke the television industry because they gave people what they wanted because they could, for a start, and it's quite an interesting way. Hello. This isn't on. Is that on? We good? Was the other one really, really loud? Have I been talking really loudly for the past 20 minutes? Okay. But so Netflix is really interesting. It's totally throwing my concentration now. But the way that they do that, and what they did with Arrested Development as well, they brought Arrested Development back. And the rumor was when they were developing Arrested Development was you can download all 13 episodes at once and watch them in any order you want. And that is just, for the television industry, they were like, what? I don't understand. And they didn't in the end, but you can imagine someone like J.J. Abrams coming along and going, a TV show which you can watch in any order you want, and if I go down to the pub to discuss it with you, I watched it in a different order to what you have. We're going to see that very soon, and our experiences are kind of just dissipating. Like I said, it's quite interesting and quite scary for people who are producing this content and having to market this content. Very, very quickly, I'm going to finish off with a French philosopher. So you should always finish with a French philosopher because it makes you look more interesting and intelligent than you actually are. This is Roger Caillois. See, I can't even pronounce his name. You can tell I don't know what I'm talking about. But this guy, basically, he did a lot of things, but one of the things he did was kind of define two different ways of playing. One which is called ludus, which is kind of structured playing. So chess is a very good example of ludus style of playing, or Monopoly, something with rules and structures and points and scores and things like that. And the other way of playing, which is this French word here, which I'm pédia. Someone will tell me if I'm completely wrong on that. It doesn't matter. What it means is unstructured playing. And unstructured playing is about what happens when you put a kid in a sandpit and go, here, do something with that sand. They've got the structure of it. There's the building blocks are there, but they don't know what they're going to do until they actually start making it. And the other example of that is Lego. If you dump a bunch of Lego bricks in front of a kid and go, make something, that is unstructured playing. And that's what I think we're starting to do now. Just a Lego spaceman, just because it's funny. I think Lego, that style of unstructured play is how we're starting to give content to people. We're saying to them, here you go, here are the building blocks. Do what you want with it. Here are all 13 episodes. Here's all the, here's all the characters. Here's all the content. Do what you will. There's a certain structure to it. You can't just let them go mental for it because you just end up with an amorphous, anarchic blob of content. But if you put some guidelines around it, those building blocks like Lego, and let them go for it, that's the kind of content we're starting to create now, and that's the kind of interactions we're starting to see with communities when they take that content. And that's it. Thank you very much.
All right, so let's start with a really important question here. What did you do that got you banned from entering ever for life Downing 10th Street?
10 Downing Street. I'm a terrorist. No, I'm not. That's got the biggest laugh of the
laughing.
day. I'm a terrorist was the best line of the day.
We're being filmed, and NSA is probably going to review the video.
Yeah, I'm not a terrorist. I just want to underline that fact. When I worked for Yahoo, me and my boss got invited to 10 Downing Street to meet the digital something advisor. And we couldn't go out the front door because Tony Blair was doing something on the front steps of 10 Downing Street as we were leaving, so we had to go out the secret back door. And they gave me my phone back, and I took some pictures of the inside of 10 Downing Street. And apparently, putting them online is frowned upon. Putting them on Flickr is frowned upon, especially. And they have people looking for these pictures. And I got a letter, I got an email saying, which I never kept. I didn't keep the letter. I really wish I'd kept that email that says you are never allowed to enter 10 Downing Street again, and neither is your boss. Which I had to go and explain to her, which she saw the funny side of it, I think. But
it's online content for you.
Yes, but thank you for bringing that up.
Yeah, you're welcome. You sort of hinted towards the last few slides of your presentation at gamification.
Yes.
Boo. I come from a development world where we're seeing the concept of gamification now being used for some creative purposes, like gaming for peace in Cyprus and Georgia and some in Kosovo right now. I mean, what is your experience? Is gamification a good trick to get people engaged?
I was talking about kind of Web 2.0 and that idea that we were seeing engagement kind of declining on a lot of platforms because people were getting bored of those kind of Web 2.0 cliches and realizing they weren't kind of delivering what the experience they wanted. And I think gamification was a bit of a last-ditch attempt to kind of shore up that engagement leak for a few people. And we saw that, and it got done well in some cases. But then we had this kind of Foursquareification of the internet a couple of years ago, where everything had a fucking badge attached to it, and it was done so bluntly and so crudely in certain cases that there was a backlash against it. I think rightly so, but I think you could see it was kind of like the death throes of that Web 2.0 environment for a lot of things, because they didn't want, because they were too. Because taking that leap into the whatever was behind it, beyond it, I guess, was a bit too scary. So I think gamification, when done well, is very good. But I think now everybody recognizes that just slapping some stickers or some trophies or some leaderboards on something is not going to make people come back just for the sake of it. I think it has to have a meaningful purpose behind it. I think it needs to, just earning a badge for the sake of earning a badge is not going to keep me coming back to your website. I have to do something. It should be a symbol of something else, which has got a lot more meaning and practical use behind it. That's my mini rant about gamification.
Fair enough, I asked. So now you work in Rushmore, which is a sort of a by invitation only music ecosystem of content, information.
You said a lot of internet words there, didn't you?
Trying to sound smart, just like you're bringing up French philosophers. Can you tell us a bit about Rushmore?
Sure.
If anybody wants to get invited and be a part of the ecosystem, how can they do that?
They can email me. Well done.
You don't have a microphone.
If you email me on rob@rushmore.fm, we'll get you an invite. But if you just go to rushmore.fm, you can just put your email in there as well, and we'll sort and it'll go through the normal channels. But if you email me on that and tell me you were here, we'll sort you out a bit quicker maybe. Rushmore is like you said, it's an ecosystem for music. We're trying to make it easier to be a music fan. So it's about putting all those releases, all the news and all the gigs for all the bands and artists that you like in one place in a kind of beautiful looking way and intuitive way. Because right now that information is kind of spread out across the web in a quite a messy fashion. I don't think MySpace, bless them, are really doing a great job of it. And so we're trying to kind of solve that problem. And then we're also trying to solve the problem of artists being able to connect with their fans. Because I think we need a dedicated channel for artists to be able to go to people and look at where their fans are and what they're doing and what they're saying and who the most influential fans are, but also just talk to them on a direct basis. So we want to build that as well. We want to build that as a platform. So that's what we're doing. We're in private beta right now, but we're hoping to launch in public next year, I think, maybe before the end of the year. But we'd love you guys to come along and take a look at it and tell us what you think. Yeah.
So that's very much process, not just the product, but giving people the process and the experience of it.
Absolutely, yeah. It's,
any questions from the audience? Yeah, we've got one. Can we get a microphone to the middle of the room? Please, right.
Or you can just shout.
Yeah, or you can shout. Yeah.
I'll repeat it.
Well, you've mentioned Netflix and their move this year, right? I've seen the show Orange is the New Black, and it was really a stressful experience for me because I've seen it all in one day, and it's 13 consecutive hours of watching. It was like crazy. And I wanted to hear from you, do you think it's a good move to release all 13 episodes in one day, or just to create, like HBO and other networks, to create that tension of waiting week per week, and maybe if that the old ways is giving the clients, the viewers, the chance, yeah, right.
Yeah.
Just lost for words. Chance to connect through the network. For that
time,
show and maybe merchandising and.
It's a hard one because we're so used to those kind of old behaviors, but I think that the key thing is that you're giving me the choice, or they're giving you the choice whether you want to watch it in one day, in one sitting, which by the way is insane, or to watch it week on week, and I think that idea of having a choice, it seems unusual to us because we've never had it before, but it's common sense if you think about it. I mean, they've made the TV program, it's sitting there. Why wouldn't they just give it to you and let you watch it when you want, you know? The only reason that we didn't do that before is because they needed to keep you there for 13 weeks because they need to sell advertising around it. And what they can do, Netflix now, as well as look at the data they've got already in order to create new programs, is then after 24 hours, they've got data from people like you who are tweeting about the fact that they know you've downloaded it and watched it all in 13 hours. So they know which segment is mental of their audience base and which one is slightly more sane and has a job. I'm sure you have a really good job. But it's that, you know, they've got that in a day, you know, and then in a week they've got a bit more data rather than waiting 3 or 4 months to collect all that data and then have to create, you know, the pilot for it and then think about are they going to create the second series or not. They can do that within, you know, a couple of weeks if they want to do. So I think that speed and that iteration that they have, that cycle of iteration, the feedback they get is just, I think, worth it and giving you the choice to do that. I mean, there were like House of Cards binge parties happening on Twitter because we are now creating our own TV schedules. You know, like we're not waiting for someone to do it for us, and that's a huge thing. So we can go on Twitter, I'm going to start watching House of Cards now, I'll see you in 13 hours, and thousands of people can join me in doing that, and I don't have to wait for a network to dictate that to me, and I think that's an incredibly powerful thing. It's also really hard to market around, but hey.
You happy with it? With the answer? Good, good, good. But it's such a delicate art, right? You know, there's this freedom in who gets involved and how they get involved with the content. And you talked a bit about permissions. But when do you know how to draw the line in terms of having this laissez-faire approach to letting people...
You just want me to talk about Harry Potter, don't you?
Yeah, I'm getting there.
Talking about this
I was going to finish with, and can you please answer my question by quoting examples from Pottermore?
Yeah.
Where do you draw the line? What is the optimal amount of permissions when it comes to building online communities?
Because I guess, I think, yes, you want to open your content up and you want to give it to people and let them do what they want with it. But then if you get J.K. Rowling in a meeting and go, hey, J.K. Rowling, because that's what everybody calls her, the Queen, we're just going to give your characters and your storylines to all these mental 13-year-old fans and let them do what they want with it. She's not going to, she's going to not be in the room very long. You have to, but what's good about that is what you don't want to do is also define a hard set of rules around that experience either. And what you have to do is trying to figure out together with your community or your audience or whoever's going to buy, think about, do something with your product, what do they want out of it? And sometimes you can't do that immediately. Sometimes you have to go out and watch what they do with it and then talk to them and kind of figure that out as you go along. And with Harry Potter, they didn't want to just, well, some of them do want to make them have sex with each other or whatever, these characters, but they have places where they can do that already. They didn't want that from J.K. Rowling. They didn't expect a giant Harry Potter sandbox from J.K. Rowling. They expected, and luckily she had this like mountain of notes and stuff under a bed on notepapers about the universe, which we could use to layer on top of it. And that became like the guiding landing lights for this whole experience. And once you've got that once you've they're going to want that and how they can uncover that stuff, then you can start letting them run around and do stuff with that instead of saying, okay, just make stuff up as you go along, because nobody wants to be put in nobody likes a blank canvas, but nobody wants, rules and regulations either. And it's very tricky to find the balance between those two things. Let people run riot, or just give them, don't let them do anything apart from that one thing that you really, really want them to do. Which, but you can't tell people not to do stuff either. Do you see the pictures of the French president that they tried to take away off the internet the other week? Surprise, surprise! Lots of pictures of the French president looking like a moron on the internet. As soon as you tell people not to do something, that's the first thing they're going to do. So there's that you have to compete with as well. So it's quite a difficult little kind of balancing act, but I think a lot of people, it's like the old kind of, like these marketing experiences for like the Dark Knight, where you have to go, okay, I'm going to go and you have to find a clue, and then you have to find another clue, and then you have to read it backwards into a mirror, and then you have to go to a location where there'll be someone dressed as somebody, and you have to ask them something, you have to go to the next stage. And they're just so, everybody has to do exactly the same thing, exactly the same time, otherwise it doesn't work. I think we're growing out of that as an audience now, and we want to have fun with stuff and change stuff on the fly. And brands and organizations and anyone has to realize that people are going to change stuff as they go along. If you've got something which is long lasting, then you want to be able to react to your audience as they're doing stuff. If they pick up on something that you didn't expect them to pick up on, you can really have that flexibility and nimbleness to be able to react to that and go, okay, let's do more of that for them in the middle of something. And that you don't want to plan everything out ahead of time, otherwise you're just going to screw yourself.
A very selfish question that I know will appeal to about 5 people in the audience at least. So the traditional governments are not really equipped well to manage this interaction with empowered citizens, with citizens who want to get involved in policy making in the same way that they would get involved in Pottermore or in discussing the next J.J. Abrams video. So from your experience in building online communities from TV to music sector, what type of an advice would you give to somebody who would want to get involved, who would want to get citizens involved in this process, not just giving them the final product of a law?
Again, it's really interesting, that Kickstarter model when we were talking about Double Fine up there. I think that idea of bringing people into the process rather than dictating the end result of that process to them is a good place to start. And that's why these things are so scary sometimes, because letting brands and organizations, we've got an awful lot of money and time, don't want to let outsiders into their creative process or the development process or whatever. But if you have certain structures around that and you can plan for that and allow people to come in and help define what the final product is before they start experiencing it, just like Double Fine did with Kickstarter, but on a government policy level, taking that philosophy and allowing people the input into that, then you'll find the ownership of it in the end result is far, far greater. And that's, it's the reason we allowed 9 Harry Potter fan sites around the world to announce the launch of Pottermore rather than going to people like Warner Brothers or Google to do it, because they have the power and they have the autonomy and they have the trust of that entire community. And I think that's being told what to do and when to do it is the biggest turn-off you can probably do. And allowing people into the process in a controlled and clever, balanced way is really tricky and really difficult. But if you can do it, especially on the government policy level, if you can do it and you can get key people in there early on, then you'll get a lot more ownership and a lot more buy-in down the road, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. Thank you. Any other questions from? Well, we've got 2. One, ladies first.
Taking a look at your website, and I'm trying to figure out, are you kind of like Reverb Nation? Are you like Live Nation? Like, who are your competitors going to be?
Hopefully no one. Next question. No. Yeah, MySpace, Facebook, everybody's competitors. I guess the mixture of stuff we're trying to do right now in terms of what we're trying to do with artists, but also on a kind of music, kind of universal music level, not universal music, universal with a small u, is hopefully quite unique. I think the closest thing to it right now is probably MySpace, but sideways scrolling, really. I think, and so, there isn't anybody really doing too much kind of close to what we're doing. There is no music on the site at the moment, which makes us kind of unique. That will come later on, licensing, etc., etc. But we're not in the kind of Spotify area either. We're trying to do something from a very fan-driven community stage. All the information on there is uploaded by the users. None of it's aggregated or scraped or anything like that. It's all uploaded by the users. So makes us quite unique as well, I think. So we'll have competitors. I just probably haven't heard of them yet. There's probably some in here. So come and find me later.
One more question, then we'll have Britney Spears Vanja Vulic back on the stage.
Yeah.
I got really excited then. What is Britney doing these days?
Please.
She's
I
playing
don't
in
know.
Vegas.
You're distracting us from the question, please.
I'm interested in hearing the answer to that question too. Yeah.
Yeah. What is Britney Spears doing these days? She's in Vegas. Okay, there you go. This conference is in Vegas next year, everybody. Sorry,
Please go ahead.
Hello, I'm Branko and I'm a blogger from Serbia, and I wanted to ask you, can you make a parallel between evolution of newspapers and TV, and do you think that newspaper industry evolved enough in these digital ages, and do you think that television itself is going to be like evolving in the same way, or it's going to be beaten by services like Netflix, internet and stuff?
I think, newspapers and television are in the same boat as the music industry, like all those old school media industries are. But I think if you saw the Kevin Spacey keynote lecture in Scotland the other week, it's still online. I think the video of that, I think, he's saying that industry needs to wake up and before it goes the same way as the music industry, and I think they're already way ahead of themselves. I think Netflix is now part of the television industry. You can't, they're not just selling DVDs in envelopes anymore. So they're starting to produce content, and that idea of those kind of guerrilla startup, just being able to becoming the producers of the content as well as the distributors of the content is what makes it exciting. You see, newspapers just drives me mental because as someone who founded a blog in the late 90s when I was 4, in a kind of response to the fact all the online newspapers and stuff were crap, and I've not seen that even blogs haven't really evolved since then. It's now even saying the word blog sounds weird to my. Do you know what I mean? It's not. It just sounds old-fashioned. It's like saying top hat. Or cravat. I just think. And that's annoying to me that's not really evolved as much. So I think television is definitely ahead of. I mean, the music industry obviously is just dying on its arse, but I think television has definitely got a head start on it because it's got those 2 other industries behind it, newspapers and music, to kind of learn from. But it's going to take a lot more than Netflix to kind of solve that. And I think they need to just it's going to take a lot for things like the BBC and those kind of incredibly old school, incredibly huge organisations to kind of open up and innovate in any kind of real way. I know a lot of people have worked at the BBC and just kind of run away screaming when they see what the bureaucracy is like in there. So it's a terrifying thing. But the young upstarts, I don't know, it's the money in a lot of things. You can't just set up a TV channel. You can just set up a blog. You can't just record yourself in your living room like if your music. So it's tough, but And YouTube, don't know. YouTube is obviously making inroads into what Netflix are trying to do and start up these kind of more professional channels and chucking a lot of money at it. But I'm not sure how much traction they're gaining around that stuff yet. It's tricky. We'll have to see. I don't have a concrete answer for you, I'm afraid.
We've been a bit over time, but I think it was well
Sorry.
worth it. Thanks for tweeting. I think you've got some really great support on Twitter that is worthwhile
Thank you.
checking after. And thank you so much for your time. Big round of applause for Rob, please.